Another day, another Godzilla minisode. You read the title, let's not waste any time. Let's try and discern who's what in the Toho monster lineup. I'm gonna mostly zone in on the big five since they're the ones I have the most to say about. Mothra is usually identified as female in most of her appearances. Even in the Japanese versions of these movies, which usually don't explicitly identify the monster by any sex, they still tend to refer to her as a she. The most notable exception is Mothra Leo from the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy. That individual is canonically male, as is one of the Mothra larvae from Tokyo SOS. I actually found this out recently. Not only are the twin Mothras in that movie different genders, but the design team actually went through the effort of giving them slight anatomical variation in order to distinguish between the male and female larvae. Kinda cool. Mothra's rather invariable status as a female monster was pretty much set in stone to Japanese audiences. Then American distributors had to fuck it all up when they started bringing these movies overseas and, in several films that were localized, referred to Mothra as a male. They eventually got their act together later down the road, and even had some slight overcorrection with them referring to Mothra Leo as a female at one point, but it still just baffles me that this was ever a thing to begin with. Was Toho truly ahead of its time? Was 1960s America just not ready for a female giant monster? Who can say? All I do know is that, as of now, Mothra's gender seems to be common knowledge to both Japanese and English-speaking audiences. So let's carry on. Godzilla is also a pretty easy one to decipher. Obviously for us Westerners, it doesn't take much thought, as his titles of Godzilla, King of the Monsters, leave little to the imagination. However, it should be noted that both of these monikers are American in origin. In his native Japan, things are not so clear-cut. In the original Japanese versions of these movies, Godzilla, and most of the other monsters, aren't actually referred to by any gender-specific pronouns, usually just being called it, or something to that effect. Really, it's up to interpretation just what Godzilla is, as the movies themselves don't really give us anything specific. Assuming you're watching them in their native language, which I highly recommend, by the way. Subs always stomp dubs in regards to live action. Animation's a bit of a different story, but I'm getting off topic, different subject for a different video. I guess the presence of a son in some of these movies might clue us in a little, but it's not like parenthood is an explicitly male or female concept either. Now, speaking of which, I should probably talk about the TriStar version, shouldn't I? This is the biggest wrench thrown in the Godzilla is male argument. In this film, Godzilla is shown to be capable of laying eggs, something that is obviously a trait of female reptiles. However, supplementary material, and even dialogue in the film itself, still identify this creature as a male that is simply capable of asexual reproduction. Kinda like bacteria. That about covers it for Godzilla. The other three in the big five are similar deals. Ghidorah is usually characterized as either agender or male. Obviously he is King Ghidorah, so that makes sense. Rodan is a pretty done deal. There was a mated pair of Rodans in their debut film, who both seemingly perished at the film's end. Only one ended up returning, and that Rodan is usually referred to as a male, so I guess that's the one that survived. Hold it right there. So in the original script for this video, I pretty plainly stated that the Rodan that appears in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster and continues to show up throughout the rest of the Showa series is a surviving Rodan from 1956. Technically, there's never been any confirmation of this, at least to my knowledge. That could be the case, but people have also speculated that it might be intended to be one of the 1956 Rodan's offspring. Honestly, anything beyond that is just personal headcanon. I like the idea that it's one of the 1956 Rodans that somehow survived the end of that movie, just because it adds a nice little bit of cohesion and continuity between the two films, which are supposedly meant to take place in the same continuity, but I shouldn't have stated it so plainly. I now return you to your regularly scheduled program. Mechagodzilla is a little more tricky. See, he's a robot, so realistically, he shouldn't really have a gender at all, now should he? However, seeing as how he's modeled after a creature often referred to as male, and even some incarnations come complete with the consciousness of a creature that is male, a lot of people think it's fine to just refer to Mechagodzilla as a male, even if it doesn't really make any sense. That takes care of Toho's Big Five, There are only a handful of other monsters in this series really worth talking about in this context. Most of the other monsters in this franchise are pretty ambiguous in regards to their gender, and many take that as an excuse to just consider them dudes. The general rule of thumb tends to be that if a monster isn't explicitly referred to as a she, then chances are it's a guy. I don't really get what the predisposition is. I mean, does a monster have to be stomping around with lipstick and painted nails in order to read as female? Whatever, I'm getting off track. Again. The point is that the vast majority of, at least major monsters in this series, are ambiguous. Neither explicitly male, female, or anything in between. There are, of course, exceptions. Hawkmuto and Femmuto from the 2014 film are obvious. They're a mated pair that reproduces, and one is literally called Femmuto. Come on, you can put two and two together. Biollante is probably the other most notable female monster in the series outside of Mothra. What a lovely lady she is. And Megaguirus is probably a close third or fourth or fifth. Actually, looking it up, there are a fair amount of female kaiju throughout this and adjacent franchises, most of which appear in expanded material outside of the films, like in TV series, comic books, and video games. I think people sometimes don't realize in general just how many monsters there are in this series. Like, we all know the most famous ones, we have our personal favorites, and then outside of that, everything else just kind of blends into the lineup because there are just so many of them. And it leads to us thinking that there are only like 4 lady monsters in the entire series, when there are actually way more. And I got off track one more time for good measure. Okay, so I guess I ended up having less to say about this particular topic than I thought I would. Whatever, a video's a video. And if you're watching this after you saw my last video, you would understand the timeliness of me releasing something Godzilla related at this time of year. Wish me luck, and until next time, see ya. Update. I am now back from G-Fest and have posted a video all about my experience, which I will link in the description. Also, the Q&A is still open, so anyone who wants to ask me any questions can just go to this video right here. Not this video that you're watching right now. Anyone watching in another tab, just look at the screen for a second. Yeah, this video that I'm picturing on screen, which I will also link. Go to that video, go to the comments of that video, type down whatever questions you have for me. I'd prefer if you ask multiple. I know in a lot of other Q&As they tell you to only ask like 1 or 2, but because I'm such a small channel and there's a very high likelihood that if you submit a question, I will probably get around to it, you know, why not just go for like 3 or 4? I mean, it's like there's a pretty high chance that I'll get to answering them. So yeah, just go for it. Go for it while you still have the chance. All right, see ya.